Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Ministry Toolbox with Providence Presbytery. So grateful to have you all here for our third installment of Ministry Toolbox. This one focusing on youth ministry with smaller churches. Ministry Toolbox is a ministry of Providence Presbytery, a mostly monthly webinar series with different experts, practitioners in the faith looking at a particular area or focus of ministry, the goal of which is providing some skills, best practices for congregations as we are all seeking to serve everyone and laying testimony to the Jesus Christ in the world. So that is what this is about, providing resources for folks. I am really grateful tonight to have two colleagues of mine to join me for a conversation about what youth ministry looks like in smaller churches, Ann Stark and Chris Morgan. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves a little bit. Ann, why don't you get us started off? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, well, my name is Ann Stark. I am the director of Children, Youth, and Family Ministries. It is a mouthful at Saint Andrews Presbyterian Church up in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Very, very good. And Chris, how about yourself?
Hi, friends. My name is Chris, and I am the staff associate for Youth and Children's Ministries at Oak Ridge Presbyterian Church, which is a rural congregation outside of Greensboro, North Carolina.
Very good. So, like a lot of things, youth ministry in the Presbyterian Church, Ann and Chris and I connected through youth ministry. There's just a very tight knit circle of folks, and the 6 degrees thing goes pretty long and far. And so that's where I've had the pleasure over the years of getting to know them and watching them flourish in ministry and just do really good things. And so what we're going to dive into tonight is, it's one thing to have a youth ministry in a 4, 5, 600,000 member church. That's a more, I would say, maybe traditional way of youth ministry, at least the way we understand that. But there's a need, obviously, for ministry to young people in all of our churches, regardless of the size. And in Providence Presbytery, we have a good number of what we would call smaller churches. That does not mean that a church is too small to have some kind of ministry to its young people, to its youth. And so that's what I've invited Ann and Chris to have a conversation with me about tonight, to kind of explore what that looks like. Before we dive into that part of it, before we jump all the way to here are some things that might be good to suggest or try or whatever, I would love to, Ann and Chris, just hear a little bit about your call to youth ministry. Specifically to that youth ministry as opposed to just ministry in general. Like what was it in your call story that led you to youth ministry work, and then what has kept you there during that? When a lot of folks might do youth ministry at the beginning and then move on to other things, you all have remained squarely in ministry to young people. So I'd love to just have you share a little bit about your call story, the backstory, and then what it is about youth ministry in particular that has had you say, I'm planting my flag right here. So, Ann, why don't you kick us off on that?
Yeah. Um, well, I laugh because when I started in this position at St. Andrews, I had deferred from seminary. And I told them that I wanted to work in a church for a year or two, and then I was going to go to seminary. And that was almost 20 years ago. So my call has not been at all what I expected, as calls often are. And that is affirming to me that it is, in fact, a call. I wanted to be a teacher growing up. When I was like in elementary school, if you had asked me, I would have said, I think I want to be a teacher.
Mm.
Um, and then as I got older, I didn't really have a lot of clarity, and I wouldn't have really said that. I went to college as an undecided major in humanities and social science because I knew that was interesting to me. But I didn't like go, I'm going to be a teacher. And as I went through undergrad, especially, I got really involved in campus ministry. I went to NC State, and I had grown up involved in the life of the church, and particularly as a youth in youth ministry. Um, I, was that middle schooler who was kind of unsure and didn't know what I was doing or kind of where my place was in the church. And then had some wonderful adults who really poured into me and welcomed me and drew me in. And by late middle school, I was going on retreats and traveling and really saw the connectional life of the church, the Presbyterian Church. And I just loved it. Like if the church was doing something, I was there, especially if the youth group was doing something. I had a larger youth group and was going to conferences and other activities at Montreat Conference Center and Masnetta Conference Center, Camp and Conference Center, and I just loved it. I was supported. I found this community that I wasn't finding anywhere else. And so as I found my college years winding down, I got asked to serve as a part-time high school youth leader. It was a small church. I had about 6 or 7 high schoolers on a good night, and some nights I had none who would show up. But I would drive from campus about 20 minutes outside of Raleigh or to suburbs, and just meet with this group of high school youth. And it was really fun. And it was a chance for me to give back and to try to pass on what had been such a meaningful and transformative experience for me as a young person
Mm.
for other kids, to try to enable them to have something that felt similarly or might meet needs that they had. And so then through that, I kind of got my toes in and I was like, oh, like people do this for like a real job. And so I honestly like didn't really know what else to do. I felt called to ministry, but I didn't want to go to seminary. And the youth ministry positions were open. So I thought, well, I'll go find out what happens in churches Monday through Friday. Um, and I learned so much and I had so much fun and I was challenged in so many ways and my faith was challenged in so many ways. And young people just ask amazing questions and they
Mm.
see things in ways that I don't or hadn't before. Um, and I I don't know. I don't really, it's just I'm where I feel called to be and I enjoy it and the challenges and there are hard days for sure. But I feel like I kind of fell into this. And if that's not God at work, I don't know what is. So,
Yeah, well, it strikes me that I mean, going back to what you were saying about you thought you would be a teacher,
mhm.
um, and yeah, I think it'd be easy to argue that you are, but maybe just a different understanding of what a teacher. But that sense of walking alongside, journeying with younger people that again was thinking classroom and then became to those 6 or 7 or 1 or 2 high schoolers in that small church, and just that weekly engagement of that relationship,
Yes.
and all of the things that happen in a young person's life,
Yeah.
and you get to be right there with it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I had people who did that for me and to be able to do that for someone else. Um, it's a gift and it's a joy.
Yeah, I
So,
picked up on that too. It's like I feel like I'm giving back. I mean, almost in a way, but also doing it because I truly feel like this is what I'm called to do and who I'm called to be. So
yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you for that. Chris, how about you?
Yeah. And the small church that you worked at in college with like 6 high schoolers, that was North Raleigh
It
Presbyterian.
was your church.
Yes.
Uh,
So,
I think you were
and
in middle
worked
school.
at this little church with just a couple youth when I was either a kid or a youth or something like that. So both Steve and Anne, in fairness, have known me since I was a child, and probably could well attest that I'm okay if a plan changes, but I will always need to have a plan for my life, whether that is the next week or the next year or the next 20 years. And so from a young age, kind of like Anne, I also really enjoyed working with young people, with kids. Thought a little bit about teaching, didn't really feel like I could see myself reflected in many of the teachers that I was around, but did have really great, strong church leaders and youth ministry leaders. And so whether it was Presbytery retreats or Massanetta or Montreat, I spent every moment that I could at church. And that was, I mean, when I wrote about college applications one day, or when I applied to things, it always came back. The things that I was most proud of were the things that happened in and around a ministry setting. And so while I was trying to discern what I wanted to do with life and knowing that I wanted to work with young people, I also think that as a kid, I never considered the fact that you could work for a church. My father will tell a story that as a kid, I did say I wanted to be a pastor. When he asked why, I think I was like 6 at the time. I was like, because you only have to work on Sundays. And I thought that was just the greatest thing.
Yeah.
But it never really passed my mind as a real job until we went through pastoral transition, and we had to look at job descriptions and who would we want in this position. And at that time, as I was beginning to think, well, I'm not sure I'm really happy with wanting to be a teacher, but I guess that's the closest to what I am feeling. I realized that what broke my heart about teaching, that I loved about ministry, was that as a teacher, most times, and maybe you loop, but most times you have kids for a year and then you send them off. And you see them in the hallways and they come back. But in many ways, it is an intense year-long relationship, and that is beautiful and so important. But I didn't feel like I could love a kid that intensely for a year and then just let them go that quickly. And as I thought about the people who had loved me best over an extended period of time, they were the church folk. And they were the people, both the lay leaders, but also the staff at churches that had walked with me through years and years and years. And so I went to school and got an education degree and student taught because I was so confident that my plan would not work. But here we are. I took a job after graduation, and kind of like Anne, now I am a little bit newer, but am still at the same church that I started at after graduation, kind of thinking it would be a stopgap before seminary, and then realizing that I loved the work more than I loved school. And I think that every time I thought that I knew what the plan was, God decided to change that plan in beautiful and awesome ways. But I think the reason I stuck it out in youth specifically is because it is such a vulnerable transitional time. I think it is the point where we transition, especially with parents and communities, from leading to accompanying and walking beside. And I think navigating that transition and watching young people launch successfully and blossom and bloom is just one of the most rewarding things. And so, yeah, I don't think I could do anything other than youth and children's.
You're right where you need to be. Yeah. It strikes me that both of you all have said, in slightly different ways, but pretty darn close, like this moment of realization where you're like, wait a minute, I could actually do this and get paid. This sense of doing that. What also really jumps out to me, Chris, that you stated explicitly, and I think you alluded to it as well, is this sense of journeying with young people over a chunk of time, over this key transitional time, that is not the 1 year, one school year kind of a thing where it's intense and wonderful, and that's great, but that you felt led and called, both of y'all, towards being part of young people in these formative years, over the span of it all, I guess is what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
Walking with them in that.
Yeah.
What about that specifically brings you joy of fulfillment? Like, and I'm not talking about your job necessarily, or your job description, or the mechanics of your job, but just as a human, as a child of God, what about accompanying young people over a span of their life? What about that brings fulfillment to you, if you're able to even say that?
I, I think the privilege of watching kids grow, and I mean like literally in stature, like physically. Um, you have those like eighth, ninth grade boys who disappear for a month in the summer and they come back and you're like, what happened to you?
Yeah.
Like, but also like as they settle into who they are and who God has created them to be. I have watched painfully quiet, middle school boy who stands on the wall and doesn't want anything to do with anyone in the room, particularly me. And 7 years later, he's leading the rest of the group in some, joyful chaos or conversation, or to watch them figure out who they are, and to know that we get to be a part of supporting them and encouraging them and giving them safe space to wrestle. It's a privilege. Like it's so fun to watch them start to explore and then to like own and claim this is who
Mm.
I am. And just the
Yeah.
difference from, when they come into sixth grade, or even Chris and I both work with kids, so we know them even younger. And then when you get to see them go, as a young adult out into the world, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You,
Yeah.
you get to be there for some very seminal moments in their life.
yeah, yeah. The good, the
Yeah.
bad,
I
and
think,
the ugly.
and I love the ugly. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think and especially because sometimes that ugly can last a long time. I
Mm,
think if I had only had young people for a year at a time, I would not be able to see the brave ways that kids grow and
mm,
change.
mm.
And that sixth grade angst that is sometimes really not fun to be around as they are like becoming little pubertal monsters, in the most normal and natural way possible. But then to like watch them grow out of their egocentrism, or watch them rediscover and claim. And you said you loved watching them claim who they are. I really love watching them claim like this is a community for them,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
if part of who we are is defined by the company we keep, that this is the company that they want to keep, and these are the people that they love, and not just because they've known each other since they were 8 years old, but
Yeah.
because they are choosing each other day in and day out, or at least week in and week out, and watching those young adults continue to choose each other when we are not even directly accompanying any of that relationship, I think is just one of the most like, huh, it worked. That's so cool. Like, good job, y'all. Because 5 years ago, you wouldn't talk to each other. Now you're crisscrossing the state to go see each other. So, I think that for me is why I really love the longevity of
Yeah.
youth ministry.
The joy of watching them transition and grow as children of God into whatever, and of doing that in a community of faith that they know loves and cares for them, which of course is foundational to that. Um, which is maybe why now I want to kind of pivot a bit to, and thank y'all for sharing a little bit about sort of why you were in this and why you're staying in it, which I'm so glad. But I'd love to sort of take a broad picture view of our young people in 2026, and you know the the things that our children, preteens, and teenagers are facing, dealing with um, in this world that we're living in now. Um, I'm curious, in very broad sense, like what you feel our young people need in general, right? And then specifically what it is they need from their church. Chris, would you want to tackle that one first?
Yeah, I think um, the first thing that comes to my mind when people are asking me, what do you think young people need to do? What do you think young people need? Is, my God, like less.
Uh,
I am just looking at teenagers who are so overwhelmed by the amount that is on their plate that we're forced to specialize at a really young age in the thing that they are going to be best at so that they can put it on a college application, whether that is a sport or a club or a persona. Like, I am going to be the straight A student. I am going to be student body president. I am going to be captain of the basketball team. I am going to get recruited for whatever you want to input. That, I think it is taking such a toll on their bodies, on their souls, on their ability to connect with other people, on their ability to try new things. I think I'm seeing more and more of this like identity foreclosure, where this is what I was told I liked when I am 10, and therefore it is going to be what I will continue to be passionate about into adulthood.
mm,
When, man, I hope I am a different person now than I was when I was 10. And so I think in many ways, my hope for young people is that they feel permission to do less,
mm,
to say no to things, to take rest, to take Sabbath, to do something for fun that is not going to earn you any accolades, to do something you were bad at because you enjoy it. And I think the church offers this space where, nope, we don't look great on a college application. There is nothing you can really tick off. Maybe you can say you were a youth aged elder. Maybe you can say you worked for a Presbyterian conference center. But by and large, we are a place that you come to not to win, but to be a part of community. And so I think that the church can kind of step in many ways, and youth ministry can step in many ways and remind young people that you are loved regardless of what is on your resume. You have a place here, regardless of whether you are admitted into other circles and other institutions, and that you are loved because God made you, and you are loved because we love you. And so yeah, I think my hope for young people is that they do less.
which I think is so counter to how churches, really of all sizes, think they're supposed to approach youth ministry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
It's like we've got to do something. We've got to have a program, and we've got to do this and that. And what I hear you saying is, from your experience, what our young people need is maybe not that. Um,
I end every email with no pressure, no expectations. And it's because I feel like I have to, because any invitation is seen as an expectation by
mm,
families
yeah,
today.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I want them to know that I'm not taking attendance. If you are not here, grace abounds. That is okay. If you are choosing rest or friendship or something like that, that is great. I love that for you. There is no pressure. there are no expectations here.
And to your other point, that it's a community of acceptance, meaning, you're loved because of who you are, not because of what you do
Hmm.
or aspire to do or anything like that. And we're not going to, in the church, try to give you a bunch of stuff to do so that you can feel better about yourself, because you're already pretty darn good the way you are. And what about you? What do you feel our young people need in this crazy world living in? And then from the church, what do they need from their church?
Yeah. I agree, Chris. I think they need space to just be, and I love that churches can hopefully provide some of that. I I was thinking a lot about community and connection. You know, we live in this world where we think we're so connected and we have devices with us all the time, and our young people, most of them, have devices with them all the time. And so we have this like false idea that we are connected and we have access to our friends um but I think, there's research and I don't think they feel connected and I don't think they feel community in the same way. Now, they're involved in all these things, but how many of those things are really life-giving community that are fostering real connections where they're supported, where the people who say, "Hey, how are you?" actually want to hear the answer and want the real answer, right? Like their social media, there's, so much coming at them all the time. So I think what they need most is community, connection, belonging. Um, and I think the church offers a place where they can get that in a way they can't get anywhere else. I always say the church is the only place for most young people where they get to interact with people of all ages. Like if you
Mm.
think like their school is all kids. Maybe there's teachers, but like primarily they're with their peers. Their sports teams, their, orchestra, their band. Um, and they see their parents and they might see family members here and there, but the church is a place where all ages of people get to be in community together. And you don't find that. Like I don't know that I can think of another organization where that's true, right? Like I don't know if y'all can.
But
Uh,
no, it's so interesting that you say that, Anne, because I remember a conversation I had with a young family in my church that came to the church I was pastoring at the time, that was it had all kinds of ages, but was like a lot of our churches, kind of leaning older, more gray hairs in the pews and that kind of a thing. And I was genuinely surprised and very pleased that this young family was come and continued coming and joined. And I was asking them one time, what it was doing to the church, and they said the fact that the church had that diversity of age that you're talking about, and particularly, older folks, was a draw for them and for the kids,
yeah,
because to your point, school all the same age, sports teams all the same age, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, all the same age. But when they come to church, they are getting loved on and greeted by, these wonderful 70 and 80 and 90-year-old
yeah,
folks who are thrilled to see them. And that was something that drew them to this church, which is counter to what
yeah,
we often think, right? So anyway, just exactly when you said that, that was what I was thinking about of that
yeah.
conversation I had.
Yeah, and that is unique, probably. I mean, most people want to go to the church where their kids are going to have other kids to be with, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I just think the church offers this unique space where people of all ages come together, and are, bonded by a shared faith and a shared hope and a shared, way of trying to live our lives. Um, and so that's, I think, what kids are looking for. I think more than anything, relationships. And youth ministry has always been about relationships first and foremost. Um, but I mean, all ministry has. I think community is really what draws people into churches. Um, but I think that's a big need for them, and I think churches do it in a unique way that you can't find elsewhere.
Which I think is really important, particularly when we're talking about youth ministry in smaller churches that maybe don't have the infrastructure to support a large youth program, I mean, this is really helpful to hear both of you all say that community connection less is actually what our young people are needing right now. That churches of whatever size, but in this context specifically, our smaller congregations, they don't need to feel like they have to try and be some big program, because that's the program itself is not meeting the needs. But even more so, in a weird way, our smaller churches are, maybe because of that, are actually in a way better positioned
Yeah.
to meet the needs of our young people.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially when it comes to community being, we all know what it feels like, the Cheers theme song, right? We know what it feels like to be known and to be called by name. And in smaller communities, that happens. People do know your name, they know your family, they know your story. And that makes a difference in young people's lives. There's research that says that young people should have 5 people outside of their family, 5 adults that they know, that they can go to, that they trust, that will be there for them, that are supporting them. And what better place to find those 5 adults than the church?
That's
And
right.
that's where I think a lot of our young people are finding those adults.
Yeah. Chris, I'm curious if kind of how you've seen that come to play in your work and in the congregation that you're currently working with.
We have, this isn't quite youth, she's a child. We have an older gentleman who has his many quirks. But he is a dedicated member of property. He's one of those people where you're like, I need to find XYZ. And you go ask Glenn, and Glenn's got the answer. Like, Glenn knows where everything is. And Eliza is 4, and new to the church. And that is one of the age groups that we don't have a ton of 4-year-olds right now. And so she does not have same age peers to go and form community with. And one of the things that I have been most tickled about in the last couple months is Eliza, whose birthday is not soon, is insistent that the first person on her birthday list is Glenn. This 80-year-old man with at least one hip replacement. And he has said, I will be there. And I think I will either bring you a toaster or a toaster oven. It's like, yes, this is so healthy and good for Glenn, who does not have a lot of social connections. This is so good for Eliza to form these connections with older individuals when her family is a transplant from the north. They don't have grandparents nearby. They don't have that built-in support system of, and especially in a rural community like ours, we do have people who are, yep, I lived here. My daddy lives here. His granddaddy lived here before him. We have generations at the church. But we also have these people who are not that, and need this community to step in and be the family support where, because of life circumstances and decisions to move, they don't have that easy family support. And I think it's been really, I just keep giggling about how fun this relationship is, but also how valuable it has been for both of them and for the parents. And so I think these intergenerational connections aren't just important for youth, because I can also give you certainly examples of our middle and high schoolers having these older adults. Our youth age older is going to work in one of the older gentlemen's garages, like mechanic garages, because he loves cars, and I don't even know how the connection happened. But the last time I brought my truck, I was like, "You're here," and he's like, "Yes." But I think it is almost a taking the place of these necessary relationships that used to come very easily before populations began to spread out, but now are harder and harder to maintain with biological family, and we
Yeah.
need the church family to step in.
I,
Yeah.
I love that anecdote of Glenn Eliza came up in a conversation on a youth ministry in smaller churches because and I love that you are the one that placed the lens that this lens on that anecdote because I think most people when they see a Glenn and Eliza and see that happen and think it's lovely, they don't think youth ministry. They
Mhm.
think that's just an older gentleman and a little kid having a really cool thing going on. I mean, how sweet! But and that's because I think a lot of times we've conditioned ourselves to think youth ministry is the program,
Yeah.
is multiple
Mhm.
kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that the adult in that engagement has to be someone really young
Mhm.
and um and I've been in churches. I'm sure you have too. It's like somebody I can't do youth ministry. I'm older than I'm beyond that. But what Glenn did was youth ministry
Absolutely.
in a very tangible, impactful, transformational kind of way. And so I think that's wonderful to kind of again help our folks start thinking about youth ministry differently.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which what I'd love to do now, moving into kind of this last little part of our conversation tonight, is to I would love for y'all to leave our folks with just what you think would be some best practices, some tips, some words of wisdom of things that our faithful churches, smaller churches, and the people in those churches can do. That is ministry to young people, ministry to youth, in maybe a different way than they have thought of. What might youth ministry look like in smaller congregations? What are some thoughts y'all have around that?
I think, our goal for all of our youth, right, is for them to feel valued and for them to feel loved and for them to feel part of the church. And so, like I think you were just saying, Steve, like we often think ministry is programs, but ministry is learning a kid's name. Ministry is greeting them. Roger Nishioka, he's a Presbyterian minister, and he has this great story about an older lady who basically chased this high school boy out into the parking lot every Sunday to say hello to him, just to greet him and let him know she was glad he was there. And then later she ends up in the hospital, and this high school boy who everyone thinks is aloof and doesn't care about anything makes his mom take him to the hospital to see her on
Mm,
her way home, his way home from church. It's a beautiful story, but just like connecting and making sure, like learning their names. And in smaller churches, you probably know them, but making sure to speak to them and giving them opportunities to be involved in the full life of the church. So, inviting them into worship leadership. Maybe they read the scripture, or they serve as a liturgist, or they pass the offering plates. Drawing them in to just all the opportunities of the church. Doesn't have to be a youth specific event, but inviting them to fully integrate into what's happening in worship or in other aspects of the church. Maybe there's an intergenerational event and you have a certain table where you invite, if you have two or three youth, they invite them to sit together. So they're building those connections too, but that they're also part of the larger community.
yeah, the worship leadership, the inviting them on to if you have a committee. Smaller churches may not have a lot of committees or whatever, but also, I've served in churches. I imagine y'all have or are where you have elders who are high schoolers, and the arrangement may look a little differently. That may be a 1 year term,
Yep.
because you know they graduate and go away, kind of a thing, but they are, and it's not a token thing. Like they read the minutes, they you know serve communion when communion gets served, if that's what the elders do. So there's viewing that as youth ministry. I think is can be a an eye opening and empowering kind of thing as well. Um,
Yeah.
Chris, what about you? What are some of the things that you might offer up for our folks as far as to how they might engage youth ministry?
I think one of my favorite ways to meet kids in ministry contexts is outside of the four walls of the church. I really love, there's a church near Ann called Farm Church, and one of their founding members has I guess, a tagline that says he doesn't think that Jesus came to Earth to put a church steeple on every town corner, but that the church really is the community. And so, one of my favorite things to do is like show up at the middle school basketball game that I know my sixth grader is starting in for the first time, is to make it to the high school play that my 10th grader is in the ensemble for. And I think starting that when they're on the bench, when they're on the ensemble, is really important, at least for us and our culture, because it shows youth that, again, you don't have to have the leading role for us to show up for you. You don't have to be the captain for us to show up for you. And so that in 2 years, when we are still showing up for you, you know that it is not just because you are the captain, because you have the lead role, but then putting it out there of, uh, hey, do any of our other church members want to come? Do any of the other youth or families want to come and see Frozen Junior at the middle school? Yeah. One of our, again, older youth advisors, volunteers, was in The Wizard of Oz at the community theater, and the youth were so excited to go see him perform. And I know it tickled him. And so I think the ways that we can imagine ministry as something outside of the four walls of church and meeting youth where they are, whether that is basketball, another sport, or just for coffee, for ice cream. What are the ways that we can get outside of the four walls of the church and be reminded that ministry is the connection, not the building?
And Chris, that's something that's so much easier to do when you have a small youth group, right? You can
Yeah,
load everyone in a vehicle and go somewhere together, whether it's lunch after church or say like, hey, this cool thing's happening in our
yeah,
town or nearby. And so we're gonna like, let's go. For churches that have, 30, 20, 40, however many youth, it's a whole ordeal of logistics to take them
yeah.
anywhere. So getting outside of the building is so much easier when you do have a smaller group and you have all these options that are so much harder with a larger group.
I love that idea of, like you said, the smaller group of folks. It's easier to orchestrate something, whereas it's a production with a big church and a big group. I'm also just, Chris, I love that anecdote. I'm thinking in my mind about, being that eighth or ninth grade kid, in the bit part in the plate by middle school, and I look out and I see mom and dad, because that's what they do, and then I see Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this 70 couple in their 70s from the church. Like, wait, what are they doing here, right? And that the impact that makes immediately, I would see as being powerful. Um, yeah, the connection, the community, those kinds of things, the empowering, the acceptance, the empowering for leadership in the church. That's not just token, you're a kid, you're here, but you're seen and you're valued, and we want to hear from you and learn from you. Um, I mean, all of that, I think, is stuff that can happen in any context in any church. Once we get out of the framework of, we don't have enough kids for a Sunday night youth group every night. What I've heard from you all is the program is not the point. Um, Traditionally, that's been the way that youth ministry has unfolded, but it is always about relationships. It is always about connection. It is always about reminding our kids that they're loved, that they matter, and that can happen coming from any age adult in any size church whatsoever. That is what I'm hearing from y'all.
Yeah. I would also, encourage if you have other churches nearby, to
Mhm.
maybe occasionally you bring, if they have three youth and we have, three, then okay, maybe let's put them together and do something together. And I think for small groups too, the larger Presbyterian church, like I would encourage, you can take two youth to Montreat Youth Conference or Massanutten Middle School Conference and meet another church with two youth. It happens all the time. And even big churches sometimes have smaller groups that are going, but for them to see the larger connectional church also, and that like, oh, I might only have a few youth at my church, but wow, like there's this whole network of other Presbyterians out there. And I think there's great value in that too, and gives them a chance to build even further relationships. So I think those kind of connections are also can be really helpful.
And I think that both definitely Montreat, and I think Massanutten too, actually have at least one or two dedicated sessions where if you can't find a volunteer, you can send your solo student up, and it is a week of solo students. Or Montreat, I think, is even piloting in like their first or second week, having middle schoolers come and do something separate that's still on campus. And so if you've got one middle schooler and two high schoolers, now all of a sudden you can go to one conference and let them be in community with each other, but also with other Presbyterians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you've also got Trinium every 3 years. And,
Yep.
this is a big gathering from all over the country. And actually, speaking to our Providence folks, Nick Setzer, pastor at First Pres York, is looking to kind of coalesce that group for 2028, I guess is what it is the next Trinium. And even maybe some kind of Presbytery-wide youth stuff, perhaps, as well. But it begins in the local congregation with connection, with community, with expressing acceptance and value and empowering, and just building those relationships across the generations that and as you point out, don't happen in a lot of other settings. The church is unique that way. So, friends, I am just grateful, Ann and Chris, for taking time this evening to sort of share your story, share your insight and words of wisdom on this kind of stuff as our congregations are looking about how best to serve with and among our young people and doing that. So deep gratitude to you all for all that, for this time, and just for all you're doing serving our young people in your context. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
And thank you for all you do, Steve, both here and elsewhere.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
yeah, this has been fun. If not, it's just been fun to kind of reconnect. It's like a reunion of some sort. Yep. The ties that bind, as the old hymn says.
Yeah.
Our next ministry toolbox will be on May the 21st. And we're excited about Landa Carr, who is with the Presbyterian Foundation and is our ministry resource officer. And you might be wondering, Steve, what is a ministry resource officer? Well, you get to come to this ministry toolbox and find out, because the foundation does a lot of really great stuff supporting congregations of all sizes on a whole host of things. And we're going to dig into those with Landa. So I hope that you will join us May the 21st. Meet your wonderful MRO, Landa Carr. Friends, thank you so much for your time this evening. Blessings to you as we continue to serve Jesus and reach out into the world. Blessings.